Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growth Talks, a series built on one simple idea that the best lessons in leadership aren't in textbooks, they are in the people who have lived them. My guest today has one of the most layered careers in cybersecurity I've come across, and I mean that in the best possible manner. Julie Fitton, Chief Information Security Officer at Analog Devices, a global semiconductor company whose technology is embedded in the systems running healthcare, automation, aerospaces, and industries as well. The kind of company where security isn't just about data breach, it has real world physical consequences to it as well. But what makes Julie's journey genuinely interesting is the path that got her here. She started as a mainframe programmer, went on to lead some of the massive projects at Dell for cybersecurity, IoT at Stanley Black & Decker, and healthcare and BCBS. She sits on the board of a large regional mutual savings bank in New England, and all of this while teaching cybersecurity at Boston College. So essentially, we are looking at someone who has seen the industry from almost every angle: technical, executive, academic, and governance. Julie, welcome to Growth Talks, and it's wonderful to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So I think let's start from the very beginning, because your background shows something that you don't very often see, right? You started as a developer and a programmer, so that's like a deep technical foundation. At what point did you pivot to cybersecurity, right? Was it like a deliberate decision, or did it just happen organically?
Well, I did start as a programmer analyst, beginning my roots not as far back as the mainframe in its infancy, but my first role in technology was as a mainframe developer right around the year 2000. For those of you old enough to remember, that there was a big push on financial systems at that time. And it gave me the opportunity to step out of my educational background, which was in finance and business, into a role of technological innovation. At Hanover Insurance, I was able to pivot from the mainframe programmer role, where I started, into more modern technologies in Unix and Java. And the pivot that I made was very hands-on. It wasn't theoretical. And the shift was very much organic. As a developer, I began embedding cyber decisions and role-based decisions into the software that I was building. And it was a natural progression into the broader topics of cyber risk management as I continued to grow my career and move laterally through various roles in my early career. After leaving the Hanover Insurance Group in Worcester, I moved on to what was EMC at the time, now Dell EMC, and spent about 10 years of my career growing up there, moving from a principal when I first joined into a director level role. And each step deepened my security focus and broadened my horizons until I left EMC as the CISO of cloud services, helping support the pivot of EMC's product lines from a hardware manufacturer to a cloud services provider.
So you essentially saw that shift from hardware to cloud, like you're talking about that point in time.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Also, from a very long time since then, right? I always feel security was treated more like an insurance policy, right? Like something that is necessary. It's invisible and nobody talks about it until something really goes wrong, right? But now, switch to 2026, or in fact, late 2020s, it's more like a boardroom conversation, right? Like we are looking at a CEO conversation, and more often than not, also like a geopolitical conversation. Right? What do you think made that shift? What actually changed? Was it the regulations, the media coverage, some of the biggest breaches we are talking about? Tell me more about it.
I don't think it was any one event that really changed the face of how the world started to think about cybersecurity, but more of an evolution from high-profile breaches like the Target breach back in the early 2000s up to the Colonial Pipeline events that happened far more recently. That made it visceral. It made it real. And emerging regulations like the new SEC rules, things like HIPAA and PCI made it mandatory. And then cloud adoption and the proliferation of cloud in the enterprise made the attack surface enormous. We started to see interruptions and events occurring to our businesses in new ways that we would have never predicted in the early days of cloud. At ADI, I've spearheaded governance processes specifically for the new SEC cyber incident disclosure rules, which is really the latest level of regulations that are facing publicly traded companies that require any type of cyber event that could be considered material to investors to be disclosed. Historically, it was only regulated events against regulated data, I should say, that had impacted a company's need to make a cyber event public to all the world. Now anything that could have a material effect on the stock price is required to be disclosed. That really grounds this in being a board conversation at any company, whether they think of themselves as being high exposure technology or not.
Right. Yeah, that's actually very profound in today's world as well, like the effects on the markets whenever it comes to security lapses. So I think when you were talking, I was thinking you've done security at very different kind of companies. Like at Dell EMC, you were managing cloud infrastructure at a massive scale. And now at Analog, your chips are literally embedded within pacemakers and on factory floors. How does the nature of what you're protecting essentially change how you think about security? Because these two seem like very different problems, of course, like security breach in the cloud versus security breach in actual physical world. So yeah, how do you go about it?
Yes, it is a challenging and diverse problem set. The changes in the environments and moving from different industries changes the risk calculus from company to company. Here at ADI, I'm navigating manufacturing environments that have operational technology globally, implementing things like network segmentation and monitoring strategies, where even the security protections themselves, if not done in a very delicate and thoughtful way, could bring down production lines or even worse. We don't want our security measures to create a bigger impact to our company than the actual security events themselves. Also managing the complexity of major merger integrations, aligning two different security cultures and tech stacks while keeping both sides protected is a challenge that many companies face. At Dell EMC, we went through many acquisitions, and at ADI, when I joined, we were combining two companies of equal size into one entity and navigating the inevitable change management that comes with two companies needing to normalize their practices and unify their approach, not just to cybersecurity, but also to how they deliver IT services. It's a big adaptation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I can vouch for that because I have lived through this journey of multiple companies where I've joined some company and it got merged, and then, yeah, like we saw that inflection point. So yeah, I think that is pretty remarkable, that foundation that you just kind of spoke about. And it's exactly why the next chapter of our podcast matters even more. Of course, I cannot leave you without talking about AI in today's age. So tell me this, for ADI, right? Like it sits at a really interesting intersection as of today. Your hardware is enabling AI systems across the world, right? And at the same time, you are managing your own company's AI adoption internally. So how do you think about both sides of the equation?
We are really living in some interesting times, and it's amazing to be at a semiconductor company that truly is leading the way. As you said, the connection of AI and the physical world is going to be an important transformation for society and our engagement with technology. Transitioning real world signals into digital representations so that the AI can interpret its surroundings and make decisions is a very new phenomenon. And the challenges that are inherent in that and the risks involved in making mistakes in that data processing and or the threats that could evolve that we haven't even begun to predict yet on how someone with malicious intent may leverage those types of inputs to have a negative effect on the outcomes of the technology. Those are the kinds of threats that we're trying to predict here at ADI on our product side, as well as in our adoption of generative AI technology. As I mentioned in the earlier question, we have factories where we're building these chips, and factory automation is a critical evolution of our own capabilities internally. So the concept of robotics and sensing the outside world and making decisions has both product implication and internal real world implications for our business. Adding to that, truly the democratization of generative AI adoption across our workforce, it has really shifted cybersecurity to true edge thinking. As CISOs, we've been talking for years about the edge, the evaporation of the edge of the network, and generative AI has really put a cherry on top of that concept. Now, we are putting technology on top of unstructured data for the first time. That is an ocean of information that we as CISOs hadn't been paying as close attention to historically. And the power of generative AI adoption is now unlocking the value of that data. But it's also implementing some long overlooked inconsistencies in how we are applying access controls to our unstructured data across our enterprise and exposing those shortcomings for what they are. That has been a primary focus of assurance in our generative AI adoption, is making sure those underlying data sources that are the returning results to those generative AI queries are appropriate and that the people who are receiving them actually have access to do so. We also worry about the sharing of information through the upload of data and protecting our company secrets from becoming embedded in learning models and being shared with other companies that may also have an interest in knowing about our secrets.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think knowing about secrets bring me to my next part where, there's this phrase that I keep hearing that AI is the best thing that has happened to attackers. Deep fakes, AI-generated phishing, and so on and so forth. But you've also seen the defense side, as you just explained, getting smarter and smarter. Like, from where you sit, is this a fair fight right now? Or do you think somebody is actually structurally behind in this war?
I think it's always a game of cat and mouse. The bad actors are trying to stay ahead of our protections, and our protections are trying to stay ahead of the bad actors and their tactics. It's certainly true that the ability of our attack adversaries has never been more empowered by technology in developing their attacks. Attackers have an advantage of focus. They only need to find one way in. Defenders have to cover everything. AI amplifies that asymmetry, and automated phishing, deepfakes, and reconnaissance at scale are real challenges that we're facing. But as the attacker's capabilities progress, so do our capabilities at the enterprise level. But we're always chasing that next iteration of advancement that is happening so incredibly rapidly with the capabilities of the advanced AI tools that are broadly available to everybody in the world.
Yeah. And also that, while you were talking about some of the major breaches in the recent times, be it Twitter, I read about Target also, and then Colonial Pipeline in the recent times, as you said. Every of these major breaches have had like a human somewhere in the chain, right? We have spent billions of technology and yet it boils down to one human in the loop still, right? Do you think the industry has fundamentally failed somewhere at this human problem, right? And is AI going to make it worse or better for that matter?
Well, I would flip that question a bit and say the industry hasn't failed at the human problem. It just hasn't fully solved it yet. We've been over-indexed on technology and under-indexed on behavior change. However, as I referenced in an earlier response, behavior analytics are more possible today than ever before. So things and anomalies like account hijacking, where an account's behavior suddenly changes from its normal expected interactions with our enterprise level technology to looking somewhat different. Those types of anomalies are now easier to detect than ever before as a result of our ability to deploy these same very powerful technologies to protect the enterprise. It isn't eliminating the human. It's reducing the blast radius when humans inevitably make mistakes, and architecting and process design matters more than awareness training alone.
Yeah, I think a true leader spoke. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's definitely a great perspective for somebody like me to learn about what you just mentioned about security. And I think the words really resonated as you talked about it. I think Which also brings me to the next section, the positives of it, what artificial intelligence cannot automate. You sit on the boards and you advise CEOs. So when do you walk in a boardroom and you start talking about cyber risk? What is the most common misconception that you have to undo before the real conversation can even begin?
I think the most common misconception is that security is solely a technology problem with a technology solution. Everyone would love to be able to say and hear that we bought this tool, therefore we're safe. But the real conversation is about risk tolerance, about business trade-offs, and about acceptable exposure. My board experience at Bank Hometown, as well as my engagement with board level conversations in large enterprises, has helped me speak the language of financial risk and not just cyber risk.
Nice. So this is how basically I think leaders like you also develop that skill of translating your technical risk into a business language. I think which is very much needed in today's world. Great. I think that is very, very insightful. Coming on to my next question, it is something that I actually ask anyone in technology leadership now. So AI is coming for a lot of jobs, right? And likely some would argue parts of what a junior security analyst would do today. As someone who also teaches the next gen at Boston College, how do you sit with that tension?
Students are always the future. It is my core belief that education in cybersecurity is going to become more and more necessary. Historically, someone who didn't have formal education on the topic could take on a role in a cybersecurity team as an analyst, and they would have many years of filtering through technical information, working at more administrative level roles while they learned hands-on about the challenges in cybersecurity and learn in real time. With the advent of such significant automation and technology in our own solutions of how we protect the enterprise, the role for that analyst to learn solely on the job becomes more and more challenging for our staffing. So it is my core belief that we will rely more and more on colleges offering programs that have formal cybersecurity education, either as a minor, as a focus, or as a major, to help us really combat this problem and continue to build iteratively the next generation of cyber talent. It has been a true honor to be part of Boston College's program in cybersecurity education for that next generation, and I look forward to continuing in that role for the foreseeable future.
Wow. I think I'm sure the college has the mutual feelings towards you as well, right? Just knowing you, I know like how much of a value add as a leader and your experience has to those kind of kids who are really looking at a career in cybersecurity now, right? Okay. So at ADI, I think engineers are moving fast. Like we know the kind of velocity that ADI is picking up internally when it comes to AI adoption, and that's the whole really business now. How do you build a security culture that doesn't become the team that slows everything down? Like CISOs essentially doesn't become like the office of the no while still doing your actual job.
I don't think the two concepts need to be at odds with each other. Innovation is part of adapting as an organization and growing and pushing past the competition. If cybersecurity threatens that, we become irrelevant very quickly. My philosophy is to enable well-informed risk decisions at the team level with clear escalation paths when someone wants to accept risk. You don't need to say no if people have the information to make good decisions. And it has been my experience that a well-informed executive nearly always makes the same decision that I would make. But rather than dictating and being the office of no, we have the opportunity to educate and empower business teams to make those decisions for themselves. And quite frankly, they're oftentimes better equipped to solve for their own innovation challenges because they're at the forefront of that innovation when they have a clear understanding and picture of the risk and exposure.
Yeah, I think that's very beautifully said, that essentially you are empowering your teams to take the right kind of decisions. Like, so there's no way of thinking about it as office. No, I think it's like more like an office of the empowering in the right manner, in the right path. So yeah, that's a beautiful thought to have. Okay, I'll be doing this conversation a disservice if I didn't ask you something that runs as a thread through your entire career. You started this industry in almost 1997, early 2000s, and that's nearly 27 years of navigating in a field that is, and still mostly is, heavily male dominated. How has this experience of whole environment been like?
Well, I've been in this field for nearly 28 years, starting back in 1997 as a mainframe programmer. It has been my absolute pleasure to be passionate about this topic of cybersecurity throughout my career. And maybe it's the field that we're in. While I agree it is a male-dominated space, people are open to new ideas. And I have not found gender differences to really eliminate my voice from the conversation. It's really about speculation, having good ideas, thinking things through, and being a good analyst. Even as you advance into executive roles, our value in cybersecurity is being able to see around the corner, being able to predict what could go wrong, being able to get ahead of it and reduce the impact for our companies. And it has just been one of the pleasures of my life to not just have a job, but to have a passion that I get to spend all of my time focused on and delivering value for the companies that I've worked for.
Wow. I think there are very few lucky people who actually live their job as their passions, right? And I think that's how you sustain a career of 27 years and reach where you are as of today. So as I was wanting to research more about the field of security, right, I was just scrolling through my LinkedIn, and surprisingly, to my surprise, a lot of my female friends are working as security engineers and leadership roles, even in companies like Meta and Amazon and so on, right? So for a young woman today who is drawn to cybersecurity, what would you actually tell her? What is your message to such women leaders?
For this one, I'd like to share a personal story from very early in my career progression. And it actually started in college. In looking at my profile, you'll see that I majored in finance. I got a business degree, but I didn't start out that way at college. My first step into the college realm, I wanted to go into computer science. I loved programming. I loved the technology. In 1991, that was barely a field for anybody, never mind for women. And I felt just as you described. I looked around the room and I didn't see myself in that room. I felt disconnected, like I didn't belong. So I pivoted to a business degree, went into finance, and I love that I have that education. I have no regrets. But in looking back, as soon as I get into my professional career, I immediately gravitated back to my roots, to the technology that I love, to the problem solving that I love to do every day, to those challenges that I faced. So to any young women out there who may be listening to this, all I can say is find your voice. Someone gave me that advice pretty early in my career. And whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling a lack of confidence, I think back to those words of advice. Find your voice. You do have a place and you do belong and you will be accepted.
Wow. Yeah. I think that applies to everybody, not just security, every woman leader who is aspiring to be at a certain path in her career, right? So yeah,
absolutely.
That's a beautiful part. Yeah. All right. Okay. Before we wrap up here, I just want to ask you 3 quick questions, more like a small rapid fire. So if you're ready, we should go for it.
Absolutely.
All right. One trend in cybersecurity over the next 3 to 5 years that genuinely has your attention.
So what I have my eye on is supply chain security. In the world of diversified technology, companies are building fewer and fewer internal technology systems and leveraging far more broad sweeping capabilities from these massive tech enterprises that can just outscale anything we could do internally. But that introduces hosts of risks whereby an impact to one technology company could have broad sweeping economic impacts. Thinking about business resiliency and how you can reinforce and drive in a world where there are no borders, but there are geopolitical tensions, and you can never predict where that next target is going to be focused. What you can do is look around your enterprise and think about that resiliency in your supply chain and how you're going to architect and design and risk manage your way through the exposure and risk that comes from that supply chain adoption.
Wow, lovely, lovely. Okay. If you could keep only one habit, mindset, or a practice that you want to credit to that has made you this effective so far in your career, what would it be?
I would say the ability to see the business problem inside the security problem. That has proven invaluable to me. The training that I got through that business degree and through my learnings of financial structures allows me to think about business value, not just cyber risk and exposure, but more enterprise risk through a balanced lens. That's what separates a CISO who advises from one who just reports.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's very remarkably said. Okay. Last and my most favorite question for you is, what do you want the people to remember Julie Fitton as? Like, what is your legacy going to be remembered as?
That I made security make sense. Whether the audience was a board member, an executive of the company, an engineer, or a student. That I was able to translate those technical concepts in a way that resonated and respected their intelligence and didn't rely on fear.
Wow. Okay. I think I will remember that about you as well, for sure. All right, Julie. Thank you for such an insightful conversation. I think it's been fascinating to hear your perspective. Guys, this is Julie Fitton, the CISO at Analog Devices, board member, professor, and one of the most interesting career arcs in cybersecurity I've had the chance to explore. If this resonated, share it with someone building a career in tech or security. Until next time, see you all again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.